Hello, Cal here. Welcome to this video. Today I will be talking about Miles Davis's album On the Corner. On the Corner, released in 1972 by Columbia Records. It's got the iconic cover there. I'll just pull it up there. Then you've got the back. And if we just open it up, we've got a nice gatefold here with Miles there, and then we've got another thing which says little cartoons with cartoon characters with saying stuff in there. Miles is my main man, alive and evil. Miles, man, can we go way back? You know, kind of blue. Yeah. So context behind this is basically Miles Davis comes out. He is a disciple of Charlie Parker, and he is a prodigious talent in his early 20s. He plays with Charlie Parker. He's very successful. He then does some albums on the Prestige Records label. He does a bunch of dates which are classic bebop records like Steamin' Workin' Relaxin' with the Miles Davis Quintet. That was his first quintet. He then has some problems with heroin. He gets clean and then ends up getting signed to Columbia Records, where his music would stay until the 80s, when he then signs with Warner Brothers. But between the early Sony albums, which I want to say is probably about 1957, 58, through to the early 80s, he puts out albums, religiously throughout. He does have a hiatus between the years of 1975 and I think 1980, 81. But this album is in his fusion period. So, as I said, if we just we'll backtrack a little bit, he's in the 50s. He does a bunch of recordings for the Prestige label, quite critically acclaimed. He gets his life back on track after his heroin habit has been kicked, and he then starts a run of classic albums for the Columbia record label. Now he does Porgy and Bess, Miles Ahead, round about midnight, and then perhaps his magnum opus, Kind of Blue. He then, throughout the 60s, continues to deal in modal jazz, which is a new mode of jazz playing, based around a different harmonic structure, and it's very influential. And throughout that period, he continues to evolve this sound. And then eventually, by the mid-60s, he starts to incorporate guitarists, and one of the first guitarists that comes into his band is George Benson, who appears on the Miles in the Sky album. And it's around this time that he meets and then eventually marries Betty Maybury, who is also a R&B soul funk singer. And what starts to happen is he's an older man. He's in his 40s at this stage, in the early or mid to late 60s. He starts to embrace young counterculture and African American culture, and what ends up happening is he starts to play with the idea of introducing electric instruments into his band. And by the end of the 60s, this culminates in a classic album called In a Silent Way, And In a Silent Way has the UK guitarist John McLaughlin. And John McLaughlin is a very important figure in jazz music, and especially jazz rock fusion, in that he was able to bring a Jimi Hendrix style guitar tone into jazz music and create a amazing crossover sound that would dominate 70s jazz rock or rock jazz or whatever you want to call it. It basically was considered fusion music. He played a big part in that, and it starts with In a Silent Way. Now, the follow-up to it, In a Silent Way, is Bitches Brew, which is perhaps his second magnum opus, which really brings in the birth of fusion. We have guitarist John McLaughlin. We have multiple reeds players. There we have multiple percussionists. And we have, instead of a swing time on this album, we are incorporating funky beats into this. So there's polyrhythms and there's influences from Middle Eastern music and African music, funk, rock. It's all getting put into the blender and creating this sound. And by the time we get to the early 70s, Miles has completely switched to an electric sound. And so you'll quite often see, if you are researching Miles Davis or watching documentaries about him, you will see that this is known as his electric period, which is a pretty apt sort of description, because gone are the upright basses and pianos, and now we have Fender Rhodes electric pianos, electric guitars, and electric bass all coming in, and we are getting more interesting time signatures that are not based in swing time. And so by the time we get to 1972, he is wanting to get back in touch with the black audience here, and it's very evident in the album artwork and things like that. But he was very, very influenced around this time of stuff like Sly and the Family Stone and James Brown. And now his technique for working during these recordings was that quite often they would go in and record long sessions and then edit them together. And he had worked with producer Teo Macero. I hope I've said that right. Teo Macero, who is a fantastic record producer who produced many classic jazz albums. And he had incorporated this cut-up technique with Miles, where they took the best parts out of jams and stitched them together, and we're literally talking about cutting tape and fusing tape together, attaching one end of the tape to another to create these tracks, basically inventing the future of sound in sampling and hip hop. And it starts, it doesn't start here, it probably starts around the time of In a Silent Way, a few years before that, but this is this is at ground zero of that sort of recording technique here. And so what we really have is what feels like lots of loops. There's lots of looping in this album, and then the first track on the corner, side one, is basically a vamp, which is like and this recurring motif that goes throughout, and it's basically based off of that. And then all of the other instruments are intertwined around that and doing different solos at certain periods of the track there. But really, we have just an absolutely brilliant side one there. And on the corner is put into different subsections here. which is On the Corner, New York Girl, One Thing, Thinking One Thing and Doing Another, and then Vote for Miles. And then track 2 is Black Satin. I think that's how it's structured. It's a bit confusing, but that's how it is. And then we've got 3 tracks on side 2, where we've got One and One, Helen Butt or Butte, I don't know how you tell that, and then Mr. Freedom X. Okay. This is very countercultural. It's very political. It talks about, it tackles with, identity politics and being an African American in the early 70s and the civil rights movement. All of these things are permeating throughout this album, and a lot of things we have to thank Miles Davis for. The sampling technique, the cutting up, the cut up technique, the hypnotic grooves, that's laying the foundations for EDM, and disco, future funk. All of this stuff is indebted to On the Corner, and all of this stuff that Miles Davis was doing in this electric period. It's not the easiest of listens, but it is just such a fascinating ride, and just all the things that are happening. I mean, it is a very, it's very, very like primal and jumping out at you straight from the start, Tio Macero, however that's pronounced, is absolutely brilliant. And the album cover doesn't have any of the players on here, but the personnel, I'm gonna tell you the personnel, because the personnel is quite extensive and I don't really know who's playing on what, but we have Miles Davis, right? And when I say Miles has gone electric, okay, look, he's electrified the trumpet as well. He's running his trumpet through a wah-wah pedal like he's bloody Jimi Hendrix. Like, it's great. And he was doing this on Bitches Brew. This is where Bitches Brew is where he first adopted this running his trumpet through effects and that. We've then got Michael Henderson, the fantastic bass player, Don Elias. We've got the brilliant, rest in peace, Jack DeZarnett on drums, Al Foster, Billy Hart. We've got James Matumi on the percussion. I guess he's probably doing the hand percussion in that. Carlos Garnett, tenor and soprano saxes. Dave Liebman. We've got Benny Maupin on bass clarinet. Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Lonnie Liston-Smith, John McLaughlin, Colin Walcott, Paul Buckmaster, Badal Ryan. So it's basically a who's who of, late 60s, early 70s jazz on this album. And then Tio Macero producing. Like I said, influences from James Brown, Sly Stone, even Carl Zeiss Stockhausen, the avant-garde classical composer. All right, there's many things in here, and it's a highly influential album. If you only listen to it once, I think even if you don't like the sound of it, there's definitely a lot to appreciate it if you are a music nerd. This is an absolute stone cold classic in the Miles canon, and I highly suggest you give it a whirl at least once so you can say you've listened to it. So thanks for watching this video. I'll probably go through more Miles Davis stuff anyway in the future. But for now, I will see you in the next video.